Next question. What is, I'm sorry, guys. What's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question.
When there was a derailment, February 3rd, 2023, on the Pennsylvania border, when I say on the Pennsylvania border, on the outskirts of East Palestine, with all of the winds blowing to the east onto Pennsylvania. All of the winds. There were these massive derailment fires where all of the winds carried it onto Pennsylvania. There were smoke clouds that were laden with carcinogenic industrial chemicals. Millions of pounds of them. At least 34 railroad containers that were carrying hazardous materials, carcinogens. At least 34 of them. Now they're basing it, the silencing settlement, on 5 containers. Norfolk Southern is. And they're making it a radius settlement, which it shouldn't be, because in East Palestine is where they reported on everything in safety. It's where the firemen stood in East Palestine. The firemen that were told to not put out the fires when they arrived there on the site. That would have been Friday night, the 3rd of February. The firemen who were used as props for the media, the corporate media that reported on everything, supplanting the disaster in East Palestine. They'd show the firemen with the lights flashing and what have you, and maybe the water cannons going down there, I'm saying west of the derailment. I'm not talking about in East Palestine. I'm talking about on the Pennsylvania border. That's where everything occurred. And all of the winds were to the east going into Pennsylvania. It's all on satellite and radar imagery. There's a complete, irrefutable history of that. But yet, J.D. Vance, he was a senator then in another area in Ohio. Those weren't his constituents there in East Palestine, but he was Machiavellian-minded, savvy, knowing that if he went over there and he put his foot down in a stream that may have inadvertently been contaminated with chemicals, because the firemen would have their water cannons going to make it look good, being used as props, making it look like they were trying to put the fires out when they were just there for the media to have them in the frames. It was all just to look that way because they were told to not put out the fires. Norfolk Southern had contractors that were brought in from out of state to illegally burn all of that off. Like I said, at least 34 railroad containers that were carrying hazardous materials, carcinogens. But J.D. Vance, he went over there, and in essence what he did is he showed the multi-billion-dollar corporations that were involved in that derailment. Essentially he said, hey, look, here I am, everybody, talking to those multi-billion-dollar corporations. Here I am. I'll not only tell you that I will do whatever you need me to do if you help me into higher office, but look at me, I'm doing it. I'm helping you supplant your lying narrative that East Palestine is where the disaster is. When J.D. Vance knew that all of those contaminants were being blown onto Pennsylvania, every bit of it. None of the contamination blew into East Palestine. But J.D. Vance did that, knowing that those corporations, if he got their attention, which he did, that they would help him into higher office, which they did, which I'm sure that they chose him for President Trump's vice president pick. That's how he was installed into office, was by helping those multi-billion-dollar corporations supplant their lying narrative. Not only, well, you'd think, well, they just criminally burnt off, at least 34 railroad containers of hazardous materials. But you see, they never gave warning to the thousands of Pennsylvanians who were left intentionally oblivious to be contaminated to whatever degree. And when I say that, I'm speaking truth, because I captured the fallout on time-stamped cellular video. And in my video of the fallout, WTAE Channel 4 Action News is there. They're there where I was recording the fallout. And they never aired their footage. They never gave warning to the thousands of people in western Pennsylvania that got dosed, that were left intentionally oblivious, because Norfolk Southern had created a multi-billion-dollar disaster when all of that shit fell out, the millions of pounds of carcinogenic industrial chemicals onto Beaver and Lawrence County, Pennsylvania, District 17.
That presumed that the reason why this woman died is because she was engaged in legitimate protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question. I'm sorry, guys. What's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of...
He did, in fact, do exactly what I just testified to. That's what J.D. Vance has done, in truth. And he is lecturing. He's lecturing who here? I mean, he's feigning some form of righteousness. He is what? Complicit in those crimes that the multi-billion-dollar corporations working with Norfolk Southern, what they committed, poisoning thousands of people in Pennsylvania. J.D. Vance, I'm sure, knows how to read radar and satellite imagery. J.D. Vance knew that the contamination didn't go into Ohio, that it was completely a Pennsylvania disaster. And he did exactly what Norfolk Southern needed him to do. J.D. Vance was a critic of Donald Trump. I'm sure that J.D. Vance was not Donald Trump's pick for vice president. When the Biden administration saw the video that I captured of the massive fallout of those carcinogenic industrial chemicals into Pennsylvania, what I captured, they came out and they said that they could see that here in Darlington Township, Beaver County, and Lawrence County, Pennsylvania, that the disaster was here. So in essence, they defied those corporations. They defied their narrative, which is why I believe that oligarchy of multi-billion-dollar corporations, they decided to put their backing behind a Trump administration, what they hoped would be a deregulation administration. And their pick for VP is JD, was JD. And I'm sure. It's like, I'm sure that is exactly what happened. They told Donald Trump that they wanted JD for his VP pick, because JD had proved himself to be so loyal to those corporations. He showed himself to be loyal. So he stood there and lied for them to supplant East Palestine as the disaster, when that's where everything was reported on in safety. That's where the firemen stood, in safety. Just having a presence there, being used as props when the corporate media reported on what was going on. The fires were burning because Norfolk Southern was managing that illegal burn off of everything that was involved in the derailment.